I think my mindset right now is thinking that each of the failures that I've faced, as long as I learn something from it, then I can be a better person. So it's better to fail and to be better than not to fail at all.
Please subscribe and turn on your notifications to stay tuned to the latest updates at the Powder Room Talk.
Hello, I'm JJ Liu. Welcome to the Powder Room with me and my girlfriends, Viola Mananta and Regina Wijaya. The Powder Room is where it gets real, and today we're going to talk about failing forward. Because the fear of failure is something that haunts many and resulted in many untapped potentials inside all of us. With us today is Judith Pitana, or Judith, the editor-in-chief of popbella.com, which is also the official media partner of the Powder Room Talk. Judith is a working mother of one daughter, and she juggles the role between a full-time career woman and motherhood. Prior to Judith joining Popbella in 2017, Judith was the longtime editor-in-chief of CosmoGIRL Indonesia. We're very excited to actually unpack failing forward with Judith today because throughout her career of becoming a leader in the marketplace, she had to embrace failure and actually experience them. So without further ado, let's come on into the Powder Room.
So Judith, thank you so much for being here with us today for the Powder Room Talk.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, to Lola and JJ. So I've met Judith several times actually during our works because we work a lot. She was the chief editor of popbella.com, and me in my beauty industry, normally we have some events together or even some campaigns together. But I know this about Judith is because I'm following her Instagram for sure. She's also a mom of a very cute little girl called Aiko. She's juggling between her works and also between motherhood. And it's really impressed me because she's very open. Meaning as in she shared about her frustration.
Oh yeah.
Bringing up a 3-year-old daughter. And also her struggles working as a working mom during the COVID, during the pandemic. And I realized, Judith, that along the time of your career and motherhood, there's a lot of issues, challenges, and also room for failures, right?
Oh, so many many rooms for failures, challenges, of course. Especially being a mom and juggling a career, it's not really that easy.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of this outspoken person. Especially on Instagram.
Yes, I can see that. And being very honest, I think.
Yeah,
honest.
Because one thing that I learned is I found that a lot of the people that I follow on Instagram, they always share their successes, but they don't really share their failures. So I want my friends or followers to know that it's okay to fail. So that's why I'm trying to be as vulnerable and open as much as I can on the platform.
And when you work in media, do you feel like a lot of pressure coming in? Because that kind of perfection of working for the media industry?
Yeah, maybe at first, but with time, I believe that perfection doesn't exist. That what makes us perfect as human is our imperfections, because through that, if we can realize the imperfections that we have, and it's so many of them, that's where we can grow. So I don't really chase for perfections anymore because it's so superficial right now, especially as I age.
We started to age.
Especially when I'm getting more mature.
I like that word.
Yeah, especially when I'm getting more mature, I just don't chase for that anymore because I believe that even until the end, we can only try to be better. And if at some point we felt that we are already perfect, then we don't have any room to grow anymore.
That's so good.
Yeah.
That's true, right?
Yeah. But so you have realized that in your life already. But in general, like, we are all so afraid to fail. Like,
Yeah.
why are we so afraid, even though we know it's part of life? Like how you said, there's no perfection. So full of fear. Like, why are we so afraid to fail?
I feel that when we're talking about failure, I think society or just has put this misconception about failure into our minds because they like to equate failing at something meaning you are a failure.
That's true.
But that's actually completely wrong because failing in something does not make you a failure as a person. And I think like this misconception comes about because like we're living in a very competitive society, right? And then human beings, we're also very social beings, and now there's social media.
Comparisons, right?
Makes it even worse, right? We want that affirmation from our friends, from our family, from the environment that we're in, because we think that is something of value because we're social beings. But I think how this escalates is also because there is a type of conditioning that sometimes happens in our journey of life. Like it can be parenting style, school environment, work environment, where these environments that we grow up in or we're exposed to, they actually favor, like you said, perfection or not making a mistake. Right? Like in a corporate setting, some certain leaders or certain companies puts kind of like a type of fear into the team and be like, if you make a mistake, you're going to cost the company so much money, and it becomes so detrimental towards progress because this kinds of like misconception or this kind of like conditioning actually triggers people to think that failure is the opposite of success. But failure and success are, again, completely two different things because actually failure is a very important like element that leads to success because it is through like failing you actually have growth and you learn stuff, right? So I personally was raised in an environment. My formative years was in Singapore. Throughout my childhood, Singapore has a very kind of almost militaristic style of education where,
Yes.
I've
heard about that.
You're not even allowed to answer questions for your test or exams in your own words.
Oh yeah?
And I thought that was in my early parts of my childhood or my learning process, that was actually detrimental to whatever potential that could have been inside of me until my parents plucked me out of Singapore and then moved me to Indonesia and sent me to a school like JIS, which has completely, it was the other way around. It was exactly what my parents wanted. Write in your own words, don't memorize. And I think like that mindset shift was like, it changed my life.
Was it hard for you, the change?
It was very hard. I was so close to, I think if there was a time in my life where I had depression, it was really my years as a teen, just because I was like, everything, my whole paradigm, where I was conditioned that this is how you be a good student, this is how you score good grades. And I come to JIS and they're like, why are you writing the books that you're reading word for word? Like, why are you doing that? And it was like, what is going on? So I have to, I can write things in my own words now. I'm allowed to try and I guess make mistakes. I didn't see it as mistakes at that time, but now when I look back at, that my parents actually moving me out of an environment where the conditioning was like, you know what, don't have a brain, just memorize, just repeat what I tell you. It took me, I think it wasn't until like my junior year in high school that like I think my brain started to work. Like the first 2 years was so painful, and my parents don't really speak English well, so they couldn't help me on my homework. I had to really figure out everything on my own, and it was very challenging, very, very challenging.
When I look back in my life, it's not really much about parents or family, but I'm always a high achiever, meaning I always want to achieve best thing in life. Yes, Miss Ambitious.
Little Miss Ambitious.
Little Miss Ambitious. So, but I think the reason why I want to achieve that perfection is because to cover up my insecurities in life. So I want to appear as a perfect person who always get the good grades. I always be the best among my friends. I always being likable, and I don't like failures because if I fail, it means like I'm just what I think who I am. So if I score perfectly in my class, meaning I always be the smart Regina that people know. That like I always be the smart one. So once I moved high school and I got we call it in Indonesia rapot merah. So I was so depressed. I've always been in the top 5 in my class.
Have you ever internalized that during that?
Now only I internalize when I grow up, because it gave me so much thoughts that why am I so afraid of failure? I think it's also to cover up my insecurities, because I mentioned in my other sessions that I always been very insecure about my body, about how I look. So I cover it up of being a good, top in the class.
Yeah.
I may not be pretty, but I'm smart. So that kind of thoughts in my life, and even until I work, it's the same. I may not be pretty, but I have a good salary. I am good. I'm very ambitious. I have a good career.
Yeah.
So it's to cover up one thing to another. Only when I realize the truth and I start to internalize, I realize that failure is part of life, but I'm still afraid of failure. I don't like failure. Even until now, nobody likes it, right? Nobody likes to fail, for sure.
Do you think you're still afraid to fail, or are you?
Of course. I'm still afraid to fail, but not as much as before.
Okay.
I think I have a similar experience with you, because I used to think failures makes me a failure.
Yeah.
And but then again, I experienced so many failures anyway in my lives. And then I realized that I'm still here, I'm still standing. If anything, it really makes me a better and stronger person. So I think my mindset right now is thinking that each of the failures that I faced, as long as I learn something from it, then I can be a better person. So it's better to fail and to be better than not to fail at all. I think that's what I realize with me and the failures that I've got. But if you
Were you
ask me,
afraid before at some point? And what do you think triggered that fear?
I think what triggered my fear of failures is because I'm also high achievers. I'm quite ambitious myself.
Oh,
And then,
hello.
I'm quite ambitious myself, so I have a big sister, right? She is way prettier than me, way smarter than me. I look up to her so much since I was such a little girl. And since I was a little girl, I always thought, like, how can I be as good as her?
Okay.
I don't think I can, but I will try. So even from a young age, I will try my best to be as smart, as pretty, or as confident, and has as much friends as she is. And I think that's where my ambition came from, because I want to be as good as my sister.
Wow.
But then growing up, and I'm close to my sister, and I told her this. I think growing up, she's always been my role model, but then I also realized that me and her doesn't have to be the same person. We can be good in our own ways. So that's why I think I'm getting more soft in facing failures, because I know she also fails at things, whereas I'm also fails at other things.
Yeah. For me personally, I think failing is such a tough thing because it's connected to so much shame. And it's not something that my surrounding created. I'm so sure it has absolutely nothing to do with the way my parents brought me up, because they never enforced that. They never made me feel bad for making mistakes, quite the opposite. But I know I was just born with this sense of shame when I didn't reach my own standards. And my standards have been very high since I'm very small.
Yeah.
I was also the smallest. I was the smallest in the family. So I don't see anyone around who's like smaller than me and doing things less good. So my standards are at least at my sister's standards which are 2 years older. Not that I competed with her, but I felt like to be like that, I guess, right? Like, and so my very first memory of my life was when I must have been around 2 years old, and we were at this event, and I was bringing my own cake to the table on a plate, and I dropped it, and I was so ashamed. And it was this shame because I failed. I was making a mistake, and then straight away I felt extremely ashamed. It burned into my memory, that feeling of shame. That's nothing that ever anyone would have made me feel like. I mean, I was 2, 3, nobody shames a little child, right? But now I could see the same thing in my son, and he had it since he was born, and there's nothing I could do about it. He always had it, and all I can do is trying to help him not to feel like that, but it's in him. And so I think it's not always the environment, it's not always you think are the expectations of other people. It can be very much your own standards and your own expectations. And strangely for me, it was like, I'm so afraid to fail because that feeling of shame is just, it's like unbearable. It's like exponential to the actual thing. It's like a little mistake feels, the shame is just as big. Crazy when you're being told that having your own thoughts is a failure.
Yeah.
Okay, so from the conversation that we had just now, I realized that it is very important. One is to accept. Second is to overcome the failure itself.
Yeah.
Right? What do you think will be the negative impact if we cannot overcome failures in our lives?
As I told you, I think for me, failure is so connected with shame. Like, but exponentially, it doesn't even make sense how much shame I would feel for a little failure. But because it's so connected, it would create this traumatizing feeling in me. Like that shame would be traumatizing. Like maybe we need to give an example of what kind of failure. I mean, there's so many different kinds of failure. We can fail our friends, we can fail our parents, we can fail our children, we can fail at work, right? I mean, mostly we were talking about failure at work probably, or failure,
family,
failure in relationships, right? And so for me, mostly failure has been achieving my own standard or falling short of my own really high, perfect standard, right? So I would set this really high expectations on myself, and I would think other people would have really high expectations on me too. And if I would fail that, I would feel such a sense of shame that would be so traumatizing that I would completely withdraw into my small, comfortable space. Like I'm going back into my cave or my snail house or whatever you want to call it. And I would go into that space where I don't expect anything of myself. I know nobody else expects anything of me. And I would withdraw from people because the failure has paralyzed me for everything. And then I would find myself in that space feeling safe because nobody expects anything from me here. I cannot fail here. And it would just completely stop my growth. And I think I only became aware of that watching my own son, who's 5 now, because what I observed in him, I could relate to so much. For example, he's very cautious and he knows of himself, I'm a careful boy, right? Like, I know that's his thoughts in his mind. I'm careful, I'm a good boy, right? And so he would do something that's dangerous, like climb the balcony, and I'll be like, no, it's dangerous. And I would raise my voice because it's a danger.
Yeah.
And he would step down and like freeze, and straight away you can see like the shame is written all over his face. It's not just, oh, I made a mistake, I'm crying because I'm surprised. It's the shame of not being careful enough because he's a careful boy and he just failed his own standard. Even though he was 3 when it happened, right? And then he would run into his room, like he might not even run to me, he would just want to be away, and he would hide his face under the blanket. And observing this, I was like, that's me. even though maybe I don't put my head under the blanket, but I might go home and not come out. I will maybe not take any phone calls. I will not reach out to my friends anymore. I'm not there for anyone. I will just withdraw from the world. And I'm like, wow, I'm 35 and I still have this. And so danger is that a lot of times when I'm on a really good way to achieving something, and then this one little mistake happens, I feel so ashamed of myself that I will give up. And I will never get anywhere. I will just stick with what I'm comfortable with, where I know I'm not gonna disappoint, where there's no risk of failure, which is still a lot of areas in my life where I feel like, okay, I'm not really gonna fail here. But if I avoid failing, I will never reach the potential that I know I have.
Yes.
I know there's so much more that I could achieve with the talents that have been given to me and all that, but I'll just not get there because I'll be so ashamed of failing in between, failing my standard, failing other people's expectations. I will just draw back and say, you know what? I have a comfortable life. I don't have to get there to be comfortable. I'm not doing it for the money anyway. You know, like I'm quite comfortable.
Yeah.
I've achieved a lot in my life already. I have a beautiful house, I have cars, I have children, I have a wonderful husband who I'm a good influence in. I can also fulfill myself through him, you know, where I would be like, oh, you know what? I can avoid the failure if I just fill all that I have and all the things that I'm supposed to give to the world, I channel it through him, through the world. Wow. And I would just stay back and never come into the foreground, but at least in some way, I would have given something of me to the world, right? But at the end of my life, I would probably come to the point where I'm like, I could have done so much more, but I was so afraid to fail and feel shame about it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow,
This is interesting because I want to share one thing that I learned from my therapist. Different types of people. There are people when they are facing failures, they internalize their failures. And there are some people that are externalizing their failures to other people, to circumstances. And actually, my therapist said to me that the best thing that you can do when you're facing failures is seeing it as it is, because it's something that we need to learn, that I personally need to learn not to internalize, and of course not to externalize as well. I just need to see it as something that I have to strategically conquer, and not making it personal. That's what my therapist told me.
I actually, you know, as I'm hearing from, like, you know, that really just, wow, thank you for being just so vulnerable.
It is as it
sharing
is.
This, right? It is as it is. And what I was like hearing out of it is that misconception of failure that we were talking about earlier, of what we think failure is, right? Instead of what it isn't. It actually becomes a sort of like confidence killer that actually affected your self-esteem.
Yeah.
And like I just kind of felt like this is a part of life that all of us have to conquer. It's like, you know, there's this big Goliath, and you know, and one day you're going to have to arrive at one point where we have to slay that giant. We have to take that giant down, because it's like, if not, it holds us back when we don't deal with it. And like I think it undealt with issues or misconception like that would trigger another big issue that I don't see you having it, but then I commonly observe it, which is called imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome, I'm gonna actually read out the definition.
She has a cheat sheet.
Yes, I do. So imposter syndrome is an internal experience of believing that you are not as competent as others perceive you to be. So as you were mentioning, you know there is that potential because of all these different factors. They cannot accept what other people perceive of them that are actually positive. And I usually, like, to be honest, I think like somebody that has an imposter syndrome, one thing that I observe is they stay stuck in their, I wouldn't call it predicament, but in that state of status quo for a really long time. And it's not because they are bad people or anything, no, nothing like that, but it's just that they haven't, killed that giant and accepted that awareness and realizing that failure is great. Failure is a great lesson. It actually helps me learn something about myself. And so before they actually arrive at that state, I noticed that they either would become that difficult teammate when it's in a team setting, or that difficult friend. It's like that, we all know like that one friend who we're okay to have around, but that one friend doesn't do that girl time with us. There's always this like unspoken arm's length, and it's not because we want to alienate the person, but it's because they carry all these baggages or denial about themselves. They become very difficult to
suck the energy.
Suck the energy in the room, and it becomes difficult. And I just really wonder, maybe even your leadership like roles, have you actually had to deal with someone that you have to groom, or personally gone through that journey of feeling like an imposter?
I personally experienced it myself.
Okay.
I really have a huge imposter syndrome. I think I'm still trying to manage that, because once in a while I still have that. So back in 2019, I think that was I feel like it's my biggest failure as a leader, because at that time I was having personal and health problems at home. I could not bring the whole self to the table when it comes to work. And because of that, because I have an unfinished issue in my personal life, I couldn't be the best leader that I could, and it made a huge turmoil in my team. Whereas before, I had a great team. Everyone was so perfect. Everyone was hardworking, ambitious. They are on the same level of belongings to the brand. But because I failed as being a good leader, I felt like I did ruin everything back then, 3 years ago. And of course, because of that, I tried to overcome it. I tried to sort things out, but it was a bit too late, I think. And I blame it out on myself, even until this day. Even until this day, I still think, because of that one mistake, that am I really a good leader? Am I cut for this job? Maybe I'm not supposed to be in this position. But then slowly with time, I learned that if I keep telling that to myself, then I could not get out from that shell. Because what I tried to do is I spoke to my boss, I spoke to my teammates, I spoke to my friends about what I did and what should I do to prevent that from happening in the future. And they're all actually giving me a really good advice and feedbacks, and they're reassuring me that it's okay, you just messed up, you can try again. But it's my inner voice that's keeping me from growing. Because I kept beating myself out from that. I kept telling myself, I don't think I'm cut from this job. I don't think I'm good enough. And that's where what you said, that we have to beat that Goliath. We have to beat that giant inside of ourselves. I think the biggest enemy is me. And as time goes by, I practice meditating, I practice self-awareness, I practice self-healing. And slowly I try to make peace with myself that yes, I failed. 3 years ago I failed. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to fail every now and then. So I think it's the courage to forgive myself in a way. That I have given the chance to myself to grow.
And would it be safe to say that, like your example of, your therapist actually teaching you that there are two types of how people deal with failures. I assume you're one that internalizes it, and having that awareness of how you actually treat failure, it became like you also had an awareness And from that awareness, you knew, oh, when this happens, I should not listen to this voice or to this noise, right? And then you take steps to actually be like, this is not correct, this is a lie. I'm not stuck at this point. And then you move forward. Would that be a right way to describe it?
Yes, because one thing that I learned in my leadership role is whenever things get tough, we often put our emotions in the situations. And being a leader, we cannot always put our emotions in the situations. We have to be logic. We have to be logical. We have to be transparent also. But we need to take the emotions out of the equations in order to make great decisions. And that's what I learned to be to myself as well. That I shouldn't keep hearing these negative voices inside my head. I just have to try to be more strategic. Of course, it's harder than I said it. But I think with practice, I am managing it better, I think.
You know what I don't like about the fear of failure is when I listen to two of you or even with JJ is I hate it on how much it steals people's potential. You know, the fear of failure stealing your potential in life, that you can achieve so much more if you just if we learn to overcome that kind of failure. Because you know, for Lola, I believe she has so much great potential if, you know, in the future when she learned to overcome that failure and not trying to going back to your little shell, you know, and going back into your little corner of comfort zone, if we may say, and trying new things that probably, yes, you may fail. And even from your stories, that how much your team is going to lose if you just giving up and not trying it again. So I really feel like I hate it because it steals a lot of women's potential as well. You know, the fear of failure of being able to be the best version of you. And the sad thing is, even when you be the best version of you, the fear of failure makes you feel like you always think that it's too good to be true. And when it's becoming too good to be true, you don't believe it. You just want to run away because you think that, oh, it's just too good, it's not me. And you break that trust, you bring down your potential in life, you cannot achieve what's supposed to be you just because you're so afraid of failure. So I really believe that, you know, we really need to learn to overcome that kind of fear. And I like how John Maxwell said it, that do not let failure bully your lives. You know, we really need to learn to overcome that kind of fear. And I like how John Maxwell said it, that do not let failure bully your lives.
Yes.
You know, because it's such a bully that it will bully you for the rest of your life, of thinking that you are not good enough, of thinking that you do not want to try because you're so afraid to fail. And when it's good, you just don't believe it. So stop it. I really don't like it when I see how it steals people's and my friends' potential in life just because we're just so afraid of fail. Right?
For me, the failure itself is actually not, let's say, I'm trying this project and it doesn't go as expected, the market doesn't take it. That wouldn't be the failure for me. For me, that would be, that's just the way it is, right? Like, I tried, it didn't work, it's fine. For me, the failure is more like, what if I hurt someone on the way? What if I don't reach the expectation? You know, and it has nothing to do with the thing itself, with the project or the work or whatever. It has more to do with personal relationships, right? And that's my biggest fear of failure, like failing this relationship.
Wow, yeah. Actually, then I think it would be good for us to talk about what then is a great way or a great mindset to look at failure, to embrace failure so that we can actually fail forward, right? Fail forward and not go backwards. Because when we don't embrace failures, we go backwards, we're like, oh, you know what, this is uncomfortable. Let me go back to what was. And yeah, I was just curious, what do you think?
I have a motto in my life that if you never fail, you'll never know. You know, like I mentioned, right, my biggest failure in my life is my relationship because I failed a lot of people on that time. But once I learned the reasons, I learned why I made that mistake or why I failed, at least I'm not going to repeat it again. Am I afraid of a new relationship? Yes, previously. But I would not let that to hold me back to have a greater relationship in the future. You know, I still believe in marriage. I still believe having a good partner. I still believe having a good husband. It doesn't make me feel like all men are bad or all women are bad, you know, in a way that I learn from that mistake and I move forward. I put that into the next relationship. So yeah, it's just that if you never try, if you never fail, you'll just never know. You need to go through that process. You can't always avoid failure in your life.
Reminds me of one of my favorite quotes that I say it very often. It's that, you know, I could have, would have,
Yeah.
should have, too late I didn't.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
It's true, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we think that we shouldn't try it out because it's gonna fail me. I always tell my team member or even my friends, they say, yeah, but I'm gonna fail. I say, and so what? If you fail, and so what? Is your life gonna end? You know, is it gonna be so difficult for you? Yes, sometimes it's difficult, but I said, but at least you tried. And you never know. Maybe you're gonna be success. It'll be a huge success next time. A lot of great invention is coming from thousands of failures in their, you know, in their research, right?
Yeah.
Imagine if they just stop after 1 or 2 times and
Yeah.
we'll never have electricity, we'll never have air conditioner, and we'll never have everything in our lives. So I really, really think if you've never failed, you just never know.
I also think it's really important to be, again, more strategic about the kind of failures
Yes.
that we have.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's because of lots of variables. Probably because of us, ourselves,
Yeah.
probably because of the situations, probably it's not the good timing. But what I learned is from my previous failures that it is essential for me to do a really deep inner work. And if there is any, I have to take accountability of my own mistakes.
Mistake, yeah.
Yeah.
And that is really important for me to able to grow. If I don't do that, then the cycle will keeps happening. That's why I need to take accountability of what I did wrong in order for me not to repeat the same mistakes in the future. But I also have boundaries because I have to see what is the situations giving me with the failures, or is it the other person, or is it somebody else's, and not projecting all of the mistakes onto me, but I have to see it as it is.
Yeah.
And
Being
learn from
strategic
it.
in your failure.
Yes.
I like that.
Yes.
You know, for me, I think for me it's really hard to overcome failure, and it is extremely time consuming. And so for me, I think in the past, when I was emotionally not very mature, I think it would have just kept me where I was. But the more I became self-aware and actually worked on my emotional intelligence, on understanding my personality, and I studied more and more about it, I actually became much more equipped to actually experience a situation, experience as it is, and then pick it apart afterwards and look at all different sides and analyze it. Maybe even change my mind about how I felt in that situation. I might have felt I was right in that situation, or I don't know, like I might have felt something, and then later, coming back to that same situation, like overlooking it, I might actually see that I experienced a feeling that was not based on the truth, right? So I can come back, I can look at the things in a different way, and then base my decision making not on how I feel, my emotions, but I can now base it on what do I want in life, right? And if I really want that in life, am I okay to live with this emotion and suck it up, you know? And like, or say like, okay, I that was shitty, that was really bad, and I hated this moment in my life, but you know what? I'm not gonna give up because it's still worth it, because I still want to go forward, and I still know in my heart this is the way to go. And even if I failed in this area, I'm not gonna let this stop me. In a way, I use that to become better. Like I analyze myself. I see why did I react like that? Why did I do that? Why did it happen that way? Like we look at all different. I look at all different kind of angles, and I'm like, I learned something new about myself. Right? Like it's something that I didn't know. And that's a moment of growth. right? It's like, I'm also like that, or oh, I react like this because of, I didn't know that about myself. So now knowing that, even if the same situation would come again, it might only be half as bad because I have learned more about myself, so I might face the situation differently. And I guess that's failing forward is you just learn from the mistake. You don't take the mistake as a signal to stop and to withdraw.
I feel that it's also important for all us to clarify to our audience that we're not glorifying failure here.
Yeah.
Right? I think as much as we embrace failure to fail forward, I think it's important to know that nobody plans to start something or embark on an endeavor and plan to fail.
Yeah.
Like I think nobody should ever have that mindset that because that can actually be quite dangerous. That can be actually used as a crutch for not actually setting the right benchmarks. But I think it is very important to actually plan or strategize to the best possibly that you can do in order for whatever that you're doing will achieve success. Because it is impossible when someone is like, oh, let's just wing it. I have never seen any real success stories where you go into a situation and you're just winging it. Because that just leaves room for absolute failure to actually happen. Because
probably that's just a beginner's luck.
Yeah, beginner's luck, right? like there's no preparation. But what I like about what was shared is, failure is such a great teacher, and what it teaches us from those failures are things that we can actually learn from. And as Viola, you were just saying, it helps me grow. And therefore, I feel that once we actually embark on a new endeavor, when we're armed with the knowledge and we've actually accepted those failures and take them as it is, as lessons or as that great teacher, the next time when we embark on something, we are just so much more well prepared because we know, you know what, I suck at this. I terribly suck at this. And so therefore, I don't want to repeat it.
Yes.
And then it becomes so much easier for you to analyze the situation of what I need or what I do not need, because I know what my weaknesses are now. So I think like when you actually do your next version of your attempt at anything, you'd be able to first strategize better. You're able to actually choose better opportunities for yourself. You're more intentional because, to become successful, you need to actually have goals. You cannot just it's not spaghetti principle, right? I throw at everything and see which one sticks, and then that's what I'm gonna go at. That's beginners. That's great. But once you have lessons from failures, you start to know what, this is not for me because I absolutely suck at it, right? Why I shouldn't go there because it's gonna cost me and someone else something. You plan better. You have a better understanding of how to channel all forms of resources that you have, be it like knowledge, talent, finance. You know how to distribute that better because you've made mistakes before. You will not repeat them again, right? I think with those lessons that we take from failure, our next version, the next attempt, I'm not saying that might be the success version, but it definitely will be a much better attempt than the first time round.
True.
But if we quit at that first version of what we actually attempted, we will never see the next better version of myself or of my efforts or my talents. And I think an even easier illustration to make this really relatable is I when I was thinking about this topic, I thought about Apple.
Yeah.
It is now one of the most powerful and most successful company in the world. And one of their initial big success came from the iPhone.
Yeah.
And nobody until today is ever gonna look at the original iPhone OS as a failure, right? And as of today, we currently, the OS that is on our phone is version 14.5. So what I loved about it, it's not version 15. It's version 14.5 that was released to the public. So it probably inside internally in Apple, there was probably 5 times revision improvement. So it's my version 14 with 5 improvements, my 0.5, but better. And what it showed me for a company at such a big mammoth size, they have no shame, no qualms. They're okay with little increments of improvements. And I think that's really life. That's really about like, that's what failure does for us, right? It's like, hey, I thought 14 was great, but there's actually a bug. We got to fix that. Someone complained. But do you internalize that as failure? I think if Apple did, today none of us would be able to, enjoy all that chic phone, such user-friendly, interface for the world to use. And I just think that we should really look at failures as just lessons and great information for us to move forward to the next step, right?
Yeah, it's true, because when you said that, it reflected back into my leadership in a way. When you lead a team or when you lead an organization, that you will receive feedbacks all the time. And if you take every feedback as a failure in your lives, I can never imagine how the company is going to collapse, because you just stop doing the next things, for the better of the company, right? Yeah. And even for myself, if I take every feedback that was given to me as a failure of myself, which I used to do that when I just started working, when I took every feedback like, oh my God, I'm such a failure. But when I start to learn how to receive feedback, and you mentioned sometimes you need to internalize, sometimes you just have to own your mistake, or you realize that it's not my mistake, then it's an improvement, right?
Yes.
Regina's version 14.5 or 14.7 is going to be, or 15 in the future. Yeah. But yeah, it's how we look at the overall failure as a teacher, as great lessons, and not as something that brings us down. I think that is very important. And so, ladies, what will be, if you can give one advice for people to take action in accepting or overcoming failure, what would it be?
I think it's really good to practice on something completely simple. Like, how do I say this? Last year, I started gardening, and if I fail gardening, there will still be food on the table. Like I do it like a hobby. I have only a limited space on my balcony, and all I do is just trial and error. Of course, I will research for each plant that I try to plant from seed. How is the best way to do that? What soil do I need? What are the common mistakes, right? So I'm like aware, like there are mistakes, and I try to avoid them. But there's so many things that I cannot control, so I'll have to just trial and error, right? Yeah. And so this is a way for me to practice making mistakes in an environment where I will feel, maybe a little bit sad when it doesn't work, or I will be like a little bit disappointed, but it's not something that will like ruin me or like will give me shame. It's not something that's important, like vital for my life, but it teaches me to be patient with myself, to not give up, to to let go and not try to be perfect and have to get it right every time. It's a safe space. Yeah, it's my little advice, actually.
What about you, Judith?
I think from my point of view, number one is we have to put ourselves in helicopter view.
Okay.
Because I agree what you said, that feelings are just temporary, but we have to be able to see things as the way it is, and the only thing is to put ourselves in a different perspective, and not inside it, but outside of it. And the second one is to keep questioning. Where did I go wrong? Where did the situations go wrong? How can I make this better? What should I learn from it? What should people learn from it? And then the third and the last one is, I think we have to find the balance, because sometimes we get lost in shame or in guilt or in, I don't know what it is. But in order for us to move forward, I think we have to be able to find our balance, forgive ourselves, forgive others, and keep trying, I think.
So when I put on my coach hat on, when I do confidence or image coaching for someone. So inside the head, my own mind is I envision that journey that person's going to go on is becoming your own best masterpiece. It's not someone else's best masterpiece because, earlier on we were mentioning society is very competitive, and it's that pressure of being compared and being accepted that makes us so afraid to fail. But you are your own masterpiece, like nobody can fail like you, nobody can achieve success like you too. The formula is just a little bit different. The key habits and elements are generalized, but the little touch that you bring to the table will definitely, absolutely be completely different. So if I were to encourage someone that is young in terms of like how you would fail forward and embrace failure, is to realize that, like nature and in the world, there's hills and there's also valleys. You just gotta go out and live a little. You got to go out and actually experience life. And I think when you're actually young, like I wish my younger self had fallen a lot more times if I understood that I had the option instead of being told that I didn't. Because I think when you're very young and when you fall down, one of the key gifts that youth has given you is strength and vigor. So when you fall down, you can dust yourself off so much more easily because you still have strength to rebuild. Yeah. And that's a gift. And so don't aim for any form of like perfection or be so afraid to make mistakes. Instead, be daring to try things. I'm not saying go out and cause ruckus. That's not what I meant. But go out and explore your daring ideas, because if not, you owe the world your potential, Mm-hmm. And on the other side, if I were to encourage someone that was courageous and how do you at this point now become your best masterpiece, I want to remind people that when you have arrived at a certain age, there's some, life experiences are lessons. So whenever you embark on something new again, you're not starting like a young person with no foundations on nothing. All that information and knowledge that you have already about yourself, your strength, what you're good at, what you're really, really bad at, those are powerful information for you to start again. And this time, it is highly unlikely that you will repeat the same mistakes after you have gone through that process of that inner work. And that means your next attempt is absolutely going to be much more successful than your first failure. So start. Don't wait anymore. Don't, too late I didn't, because I don't think we have time at that point, Yeah. We have to go out and try. And again, we owe the world and the people that we have influence in our lives that gift of ourselves, that only we have that unique DNA to actually project out to the world. Nobody can do it the same way that each individually we can actually contribute. So I really encourage people to go out and just fail forward and and strive.
Because the failing forward is also a title of a book from John Maxwell, right? And besides, he talks a lot about leadership, and he said that when you take action actually reduces fear and increases courage. Because once you make that step, it reduces the fear of failure, because at least you have met that step. So you need to keep making an action rather than just sit back and do nothing. And he also said that fail often and fail early.
Fail often and
fail early. Because the earlier you learn about failure in your childhood, in your kids, right, in your teenage years, you learn that not all failures are a mistake and not all failures are your identity. I think it's really good for them to learn that failure is okay, failure is a teacher. But again, for me, it's also having a clear goals in your life. It helps. Because when you know what is your goals in your life, you always wanted to achieve that goals. And you will do whatever it takes to achieve that goals. no matter how many failures that you've had in your past life or how many failures that you are going to have in the future, once you set your mind on the clear goals, you will take that as a lessons. You will not stop. It will not stop you because you just want to achieve that point. You just want to achieve the destinations. So when you know your destination, no matter how many failures that you have, you will still keep going. Like you mentioned, at the end, we just have to keep going and not let failures to hold us back because you owe the world.
Yeah.
You owe the world your potential. You owe to the world whatever you can bring out the best of you and leaving this world empty. Because that's the point. You're not going to leave this world filled with a lot of stuff that you don't give it out. But I want to leave this world empty because I have emptied out whatever that is my life to the world. And I will not let failures to hold me back because that is what it is. So just have a clear goals and how you're going to achieve that.
You know, I agree with you. It's important to have goals, and so we have focus and keep going forward. But there was a point in my life where I had already achieved my goal, and I was 26, and I had achieved everything that I wanted, that I thought valuable, and I reached that point. It wasn't so good. Like it was everything I ever wanted, and people congratulated me for making such good life choices because I had probably everything that everyone else also wanted. But I couldn't feel anything. I just couldn't feel anything. But you know, those goals that I had were being married, having a child, or having children, having a good husband, handsome, having a house, having a car, having a wardrobe full of beautiful clothes. And I had all that, and I could go shopping not thinking about how much money I spent. That's great too, right? Or I had a business with my friends, like it wasn't too big, but it wasn't a business, you know. So I was living the life in a way. Oh, we were traveling so much everywhere. Like my life looked amazing on pictures, and it was amazing, but I couldn't feel that, right? So I realized all these goals, or that goal that I had, it was all about myself. It was all things that were just for me. And it took me years to actually find a higher calling, right? And to know, oh, there is actually more to life than this. But when I was 26 and I came to the point where I had everything that I thought I ever wanted, it was horrible. It was so empty. It was so, now what? Like when you're 26 and you achieve the things that you hold valuable, then what, right? And so if you have achieved that, or if you feel like you've achieved a lot of things, and you're meant to feel like, yeah, that's it, you know, and you don't feel that, maybe there's more. And I believe that more, or that ultimate goal, like that maybe you can put yourself next, is actually your true calling in life. And that is outside of my own. It's outside of what I want. It's not selfish anymore. It is actually now about others. And I know my calling is about others. Like, it's not about achieving what I want, because I already have everything I want. The thing I want to achieve now further is for other people. But it's so blurry sometimes. It is so blurry in moments where I cannot feel love for other people because I don't feel loved myself, or where I don't love myself. And then there's moments where I feel loved and I feel so full, and the picture becomes really clear. And I'm like, that's my goal, I'm gonna go for it. But it's much harder if it's, for me personally, if that goal is outside of myself, because it's so connected to, am I being loved? Do I feel loved, right?
So can we say that sometimes the best way is also to love yourself?
Yeah, I bet.
I mean, to, like you mentioned, internalize and to love yourself in a way.
And be kind to yourself.
That
growth is a process. It may not be linear, but sometimes, like what you said, it sometimes hills and valleys.
Yeah, and I think maybe that love, I mean, it almost sounds, oh, is this off topic? No, it's not. It's actually on topic, because you need that actually power your failures or your attempts, because you need that confidence. When you have that confidence, you dare to have courage to go out and try, because now you realize that the little steps of, falling so you learn something has got nothing to do with you being a failure. But instead, it's actually the opposite. If we don't try, we may actually end up feeling like a real failure at the end of the day, because we have maybe a tall list of micro regrets now, and now you're like, wow, I'm a person that's gonna die, or with regrets because of all these things that I never had the courage to try because I was so afraid to fail.
Yeah.
It's like the book I just read, it's Tuesdays with Maury.
Oh, I love.
Remember the book?
I love that book.
Years ago.
I've read that 2 or 3 times.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He told in the book that the biggest regret in your life is when you're in your deathbed and then you realize there's so many things that you should have done. And I think we can agree that we don't want that to happen in the future. So we have to live our fullest life with the regrets.
But I think those regrets are probably not about things that we haven't achieved for ourselves.
Yes.
But things that we haven't given to others.
Yes. That's true.
So to our audience, I really hope that our conversation today has been helpful, because we've been able to actually give you something valuable that you can take away, trigger some deeper thoughts within yourself, and encourage you to actually have courage to achieve in life and embrace the little steps of failure that would be inevitable. At the same time, through our conversations, you would have learned that most of the failures that actually occur in life, many are actually beyond our control. But how we actually react to that failures and those mistakes, how we pick ourselves up, is actually the important elements for you to actually move into your future with success. So we really hope that you will not quit and that you will always continually dare to try and dare to fail forward. We send you a lot of love and light as always.
Thank you so much for watching. And please leave us some comments in the comments below, in the comment section, about what you thought about what we're talking about, what's in your heart about this. And if you have any friends that you feel could benefit from watching this, just forward it to them. Please also subscribe to our channel. It would mean a lot to us. And you can also follow us on Instagram and on Facebook. Thank you, Judith, so much that you were with us on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so good to be here.
Yes, thank you so much.
So to our audience, well, till next time at the Powder Room, goodbye.
Bye-bye.